Please be ready to engage with our panelists and share your own experiences at the end of the session. And to introduce our panelists, I'll turn it over to Jen Brown, the Director of Clinical Research Quality at Medical College of Wisconsin.
Thanks for joining us today, everybody. Again, my name is Jen Brown. I work at the Medical College of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. I'm excited to help moderate this panel today regarding reducing the carbon footprint in clinical trials. I will turn it over to my fellow panelists to introduce themselves and their what organization they're with and why this topic is important to them.
Great, thank you. I am Sara Brueck Nichols with McCreadie Group. You may know us better by our flagship product, Vestigo. Joining rainy Atlanta, who has the same weather as I left in Salt Lake City, Utah. So I was kind of disappointed about that. This topic is particularly important to me. Sustainability is part of my DNA. Growing up in the American Southwest as the daughter and granddaughter of National Park Service employees, but also having spent the last 25 years of my career in technology and specifically in healthcare technology, really bringing it down to micro steps. So we were talking earlier about, a 1,000-mile journey starts with the first step. And I think a lot of times we hear these big, like global sustainability, all these big words, and we're like, I can't even figure out how to get space bigger than a broom closet. How am I supposed to think about this? And my passion really is in those first steps. What first steps can you take as a site that makes this less overwhelming, that drives the economic impact that administrators want, while also driving that sustainability impact and faster time to approvals?
Sandy Kennedy with Fortrea, and I'm our Chief Sustainability Officer. I also wear the hats of Quality Officer and Regulatory Affairs. When we began our program at Fortrea with sustainability in particular and ESG, we were looking primarily at what does our company do. Within our facilities, we own and operate 4 phase 1 units. So the opportunities to be sustainable and to have specific targets of what we're going to do differently in those sites that we own and operate, much different than when you think about the clinical trials more broadly. So as I continued to go further and further and immerse myself into what does true sustainability look like, again, those first steps that then you start to build and create a swell of interest as well as really tangible things that we can do within our clinical trials holistically that are not being operated out of the facilities that we own that we can influence. So then you come across Sustainable Healthcare Coalition, who took it the next step and gave an open letter to the industry. How do we respond to that? How do we work with our sponsors better to look at the clinical trials that we are conducting on their behalf, and how do we partner together to really put forth some changes that we can propose that can be adopted that have a material reduction in the carbon footprint of that trial. So it was kind of a journey for me from what we do and now to what we can influence. So great to be here with you today.
Thank you both, and hopefully we will get Patrick online. He's joining us from Switzerland, and I know it's late in the day there, and Patrick joins us from Novartis on behalf of sponsors. So, but thinking about where sustainability in clinical trials has come from over the years, even reminiscing when I first started in clinical research, we had to fax our data to the sponsors or the 3-ply tear-off CCRF form. So it's amazing to see how far research has come, but also how far we have yet to go. So thinking about even in the last 5 years since the pandemic, what does low carbon clinical trials look like in practice today? Obviously, sites are making the use of fluorants and other products to go paperless, use of wearables, but just in your experience, what other facets are you seeing to help reduce that carbon footprint?
For me, it looks like automation. It looks like no free-range chickens, right? Which is apparently the hot topic of the conference today. And that's really around standardization, right? And efficiency, reducing the things that cause us to have to work harder, right? The 3-ply papers, right?
Yep.
Moving to technology reduces those steps, but we have to do it smartly. We have to improve our workflows as well, and I think technology allows us to do that. And anytime we're driving more efficiency, we're driving more sustainability, and not from just an environmental impact, but sustainability as a department, sustainability as a researcher, sustainability as an investor in trials.
There's many levers within a clinical trial that we have that we can look into, and the carbon calculator and implementing that within our bid defenses, even within post awards, what we are finding is as we work through all of the questions that calculator asks, we're able to then see, wait a minute, how many procedures is this patient going to be scheduled for? Are there any that could be done remotely? Could we do centralized phlebotomy that then still goes to a central lab for those central lab values, but not have all of the heavy logistics cost of air shipping all of this these samples everywhere? So we have actually been able to influence changing some of the protocol schedule of events. Obviously, you have to have a strong partnership with your sponsor to be able to do these things, because we can't implement them without our sponsors. So we can influence. Some of the changes that we've made, one time we did actually recommend moving a trial from the US over to a different facility in the UK. Because of some of the procedures and because of some of the screening labs and the logistics, it made a material difference with the carbon calculator output. So again, we're continuing to pursue a number of those in-trial changes so that it's not quite as nebulous and only on the facility of how sustainable is the facility itself. Travel obviously is a huge cost of carbon, getting people there, getting patients there. But even looking at working with centers, it's interesting as the research sites themselves, we found that we had a decentralized clinical trial model, and we were using a courier to get medication to patients so they didn't have to come in. When we actually looked at one particular site, the patient lived in walking distance, but we didn't have that information to know, wait a minute, we actually just spit more carbon trying to be carbon offsetting when the patient could have just walked here to get it. So what we are finding is partnering with sites in a more community sense that are not these big global sites that are where there's a lot of travel back and forth. We are actually able to navigate through to a couple of specific reductions that we can implement, and it changes our mindset, how we interact with the sponsor, how we interact with our investigators, how we interact with ourselves. It's funny, just going back several years, I don't even know if I want to see a show of hands how old I am. Someone mentioned 3-part NCR, case report forms. Do y'all remember that? Does anybody else remember those? Does anybody else remember the FedExing of lab reports? They had to go out by the end of the day. And, when you were qualifying a lab, you wanted to see where's the big room that was the size of a gymnasium that was collating these investigator site patient-specific reports using, paper and printers and et cetera to then FedEx to a site, whether they be next door, the next county, next country over. It's pretty ridiculous when you think about how quickly that just seems like an urban legend that we actually used to do that. Now, I'm going to pause because I see Patrick is here with Novartis. Can you say,
Yes.
you see him on the screen as well?
Yes, welcome,
I can't see the
Patrick.
screens.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for me and technology. But I'm happy that it finally worked out. So my name is Patrick. I'm from Novartis, and I'm the clinical and sustainability lead here at Novartis. So responsible for integrating sustainability in the way we design clinical trials, but then also conduct them, how we ultimately become better at measuring the impact that we have, and overall reduce emissions across ourselves, but also across the industry.
And Sandy had mentioned the carbon calculator. Patrick, do you want to speak to your experience with that? I know we have a link to share also, but what steps Novartis is doing to reduce carbon footprint?
Yeah, I can briefly speak about that, right? So we are part of the Sustainable Healthcare Coalition, where we're collaborating with other industry peers on creating some standards, right? So we can make it more comparable how the footprint of clinical trials is calculated. We're at Novartis, we have an assessment that we've been doing for the last couple of years already. So we have a good picture around like what are some of the hotspots that we see across clinical trials. So we do actually do that across our whole study portfolio. And that helps us to make some informed decisions, right? On where to go, what to optimize, with which vendors to partner, and so on and so forth, right? So that is a quite powerful tool for us, and we're looking forward to further scaling that and implementing it even broader, so it becomes part of the kind of everyday decision making, as I like to say.
Great, thank you. Thinking about sustainability also beyond just the environmental impacts, but thinking about the impact to organizations beyond the carbon footprint per se. Again, I'm thinking when we went paperless and started using technology to help facilitate workflows at our site, just the time savings alone, and time and effort, transportation, other things to facilitate. But in your experience, what other benefits have you seen beyond the environmental scope?
I mean, I think the big one that, a couple of big ones. One for sure is cost control. Technology is cheaper than humans. And I'm not saying that we need to replace humans. I'm not one of those. But it does, I mean, it can do more faster. And so there's a cost control component, which I think is really critical and especially timely right now. And I think the other thing is public trust. And it's easy to say, well, what does that matter? But you know, we heard this morning, we've heard all the way through, no one in healthcare has not heard healthcare is in trouble, the financial impacts and metrics don't align with the patient metrics and outcomes. And really, honestly, to have good public trust in what we're doing, we have to have that sustainability and that efficiency to say, look what we're doing our part to reduce that cost. We're doing our part to reduce time to access, time to treat, time to approval, all of these things. Any time savings is money savings. And I think that's one of the big parts of sustainability that sometimes we forget to include in our conversations around those.
I'm going to go with quality. And I know that at Fortrea, I wear the hat of quality officer as well. But I look at sustainability and quality, they have to be both. Because, you know, otherwise you start chasing down a new problem you've created potentially. But think about the day where, you know, when we have an investigator site file, I'm just going to make one example, an investigator site file that is almost a duplication of the trial master file at our respective company, at a CRO, and then also at a sponsor. So, you know, Patrick using Novartis, we are running a trial, your files, my files, Wisconsin files, they should be, you know, contain many of the same elements for the basic protocol elements, especially the investigator site file. Why would we have 3 of those rather than one source file that is populated and we all access it for the purpose of that trial? You know, so think about IRB submissions and ethics committee submissions, whereby, you know, we now see all of that together. Back in the day, I remember auditing studies where there would be 127 Dear Doctor safety letters, and you had to check and make sure they were all there. Well, gone can be those days because I don't have to do that. So it's not just more efficient, to your point, but it's actually increased quality because I'm not worried about that. That's been automated. I know you've got 125 because I got the report that showed we've got 125 signatures where you forwarded it on to your ethics committee. I don't even have to look at that. I can delve further into where did these patients come from? Tell me about the consenting process, not the form, but the process. How are we at, increasing our patient diversity of enrollment? Do we have health equity there? What's going on with the protocol? And I can have less frequent, more targeted visits as a monitor because I'm not looking at a lot of administrative, and I'm not equating safety with administrative, so you guys go with me there. I'm looking at the administrative task of confirming safety letters are on site, et cetera, because those aspects have been automated and they're no longer there. Those are components of AI. So again, how do I know that works? Well, we've got a validated program that works, and we can prove that it works. So I think that the quality aspect to me allows automation of administrative tasks that then allows me to ask the higher level questions of connecting, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? How are you doing this? Impact to patients. How can we better retain these patients, et cetera? Because I'm not chasing data points.
Great point. Patrick, from the sponsor perspective, other efficiencies outside of the environmental?
Yeah, those are great points. I think the environmental impacts always often go hand in hand with other win-wins, right? On the financial side, we definitely see that. Many of our initiatives bring those efficiency gains, right? But maybe to also highlight that oftentimes the environmental burden, as it decreases, it also decreases the operational burden, but then also the site burden and the patient burden, right? I mean, the less unnecessary additional elements we add to our studies, the lower the burden is for sites, the lower the burden is for patients, right? To come to sites very regularly. But also, whenever we have those conversations with then specific hospitals, sites, and so on, they're very much welcome that we actually don't send them 10,000s of kits that then they have to destroy and so on and so forth, right? So there's a lot of benefits that comes with it, and we see it as a win-win for the environment and for business outcomes as a whole.
Absolutely. From a site perspective, I can just speak the amount of space from not having to store laboratory kits, binders, all of those pieces that are necessary, but not having the space to do so. So taking those advances has really helped sites in that perspective. Sandy had mentioned AI, and I know that has been the buzz through the start of the conference so far, but how do you see AI potentially changing how sustainability is incorporated into trials?
I think the biggest thing for me is, first of all, AI has been around for quite a while, right? Machine learning, we've been doing big data machine learning for a hot minute. AI has democratized that and allowed those who are not writing code, those who are not statisticians, to be able to get information out of big data without that knowledge. But I think, the big thing for me when I'm thinking about what are those little things that are on the horizon that have big impacts, and it really is around, for me, I think about every day, inventory management, right? AI, the ability to predict what inventory you need and when and how much is here right now. It's not a future thinking thing. It is here now, and with the right technology and the right technology ecosystem and the right focus on standardization and workflows, right? Think of not only the efficiency, but the safety, the efficacy, the environmental impact of being able to appropriately forecast inventory and the benefit it has from the sponsor all the way down to the patient. And that's really where I see sort of the first big piece because it's there and it's available now for those parties who are interested and willing to take one step into not even the dark, but just slightly different operating module.
Yeah, I think that's a great beginning. And I think also just deconstructing the term AI, because I think it can be a bit off-putting, But what is it exactly? I've even had, as I'm on the AI council within our company with IT and legal, and we approve all of our AI business cases. And there was one that was submitted, I was like, this isn't AI, this is a bot. Or one was like, this is a macro. You basically took data out of one here and you moved it over here by connecting fields in this. This is not AI. So deconstructing and breaking down what is AI, what does it really mean, and differentiating it between bots, macros, and more of the machine learning. What is it exactly? What is AI? You'd be surprised when you break that down. True AI with the computer doing your advanced thinking for you and crafting for you is. We're really not seeing that much AI in broad strokes. It's helping us do some tactical things, but right now we're not seeing it. You're not seeing an AI generated clinical, study report. Interestingly enough, we've tried it. We've taken, our TLFs and gone to say, okay, let's, write this particular summary of safety or what have you, because we're doing pilot tests to see how good could it be. So we're on the cusp of some of this, but we're truly not there all the way yet. I think that some of the other specific things that we can do, when you think about just data and data collections, one of the things we did was to work with a partner company with the carbon calculator to say, we are going to deploy, the devices, not just for ePro and eConsent and different pieces of information back and forth to the patients, but we're going to do a bring your own device. So I don't know if anybody's ever done a clinical trial with BYOD concept, where you're not providing these devices that can be costly. You have to ship them out. You have to have someone have made them. You have to reconcile them, ship them back, destroy them, or decide what you're going to do with them next. Rather, what we did was we put it on an app, and patients downloaded the app for that trial. And then we were able then to use the patient's phone and device. We don't have to validate the phone but the app itself was the mode of that communication of that information. And it worked really well. So think about something even as relatively simple as that. Now, the logistics can be complex and complicated, and that's where you use your IT department. But the savings is significant. And so again, it's more of I like to think about AI and break it down as to how do we use data and how do we use systems to connect data, package up data, bring data together so then we can use it. And then we'll go the next step.
I think not having to be tech support for all of the magical devices across every study would be music to every research coordinator's ears.
Oh my gosh, yes. And as somebody who's participated in clinical trials and the parent of a child in a clinical trial, to not have to have 37 devices, right? Like, oh, we have to take this extra device that nobody plans on, it has its own power cord. Mm-hmm. Like that alone would make me celebrate.
Yeah. Patrick, anything involving AI from your end?
Yeah, obviously AI is quite a buzz these days, right? We just at Novartis, we also had our AI week last week. And one thing that I think is just important that we always put the human at the center, right, of everything. But as much as AI can improve those decisions that humans are taking into making more informed decisions, into making more data-driven decisions, into kind of minimizing inefficiencies and so on, there's certainly a huge potential that AI can bring. And we're seeing that already in our company, right, in how certain elements are being integrated. It's just important that we train it accordingly, right, so that it also considers the environmental sustainability factors, because otherwise, it might not prioritize those.
I want to be mindful of time, but as we've made sustainability efforts, what challenges have you seen or identified, I guess from everyone's perspective? I know from the site side, some of it is culture, where you're set in your ways, you're used to the way things have always been done. And when it comes to taking sustainability measures, whether it's shifting to a paperless format, whether it's another program and partnering depending on the study, it can be quite overwhelming for sites depending on the site of the site, size of the site, and how many studies are in their portfolio. But what other challenges have you experienced in this space?
I think one of the things that we have seen is that everybody assumes technology is going to be as big and resource consuming as an EHR platform. So anybody who's ever gone through a Cerner implementation or an Epic implementation, or heaven forbid you decide to change platforms, right? Like you've been there, I can see it. That is a nightmare, and it stops everything else. And so I see a lot of times people really, I've not run into anybody who isn't for technology. What I've run into is people saying our IT department doesn't even have time to do this. And I think one of the things to think about is that so many of the solutions now are cloud-based and really require very little from an IT perspective on the site, or that we as vendors and service providers are taking on the burden of that and taking on the burden of building out integrations and helping create those ecosystems. The other thing that I see a lot of is legal reticence, right? When I worked, I spent a number of years working for a PBM, a very large PBM, and one of the things that I used to say frequently to our chief privacy officer was, do we have any attorneys that have graduated from law school in the 21st century? Because so much of it depends on how you interpret things, right? And we see a lot of legal reticence when we're working through things with attorneys that are not familiar specifically with research law and how it differs from HIPAA and the nuances there, and they hear technology and all they think is breach and risk, and we're not sure we want to do that. And that stops that innovating. That culture, like you talked about, can really permeate down. And one of the things that I have found is specifically talking through what it does and what it saves and how it actually reduces risk in those areas to help bring those attorneys along the way with us, because them and our IT departments are super critical partners in all of this, and we can't do it without them.
You asked the word, what's the greatest challenge? I'm going to change it a little bit to opportunity. And the reason is because what I've seen so far as we've been operating with our sponsors with the clinical trial carbon calculator, even when it went from like the first version now quickly onto the second version, I know there's a third version that's being worked on that gives iterative opportunities to run your trials through and make iterative changes to say, okay, if we did this, how could this reduce the carbon outlay? I think the opportunity that it brings to us is increased discussions with sponsors up front prior to receiving a fully baked, fait accompli protocol, run this. Because now, many of our sponsors are requiring that, we have, produced 3 specific recommendations, or, they are requiring that this be included in the bid defense, or, within that startup, at some point. We're also seeing the opportunity with implementation of KPIs of how do we reduce carbon through the conduct of the trial. That can only be done with increased partnership with sponsors, because we can't change the protocol design. We can't decide, we really don't need visit assessment 9. That can be done remote. We can recommend and we can implement with them, but we can't just change that. So I think that it gives us a lot more opportunities to have those discussions up front. We heard Rob Califf today say that 1/3 of all data points aren't even used in clinical trials. Yet we see trials becoming greater and greater with respect to the length, the numbers of procedures, and the complexities as well. So again, I think that these bring opportunities for us to have conversations up front so that we can all be on the same page as we then go to implement the study.
I know we are close to time, so Patrick, I'm going to start with you. What nugget of advice would you give to sites who are looking to improve their sustainability or to partner with sponsors on more sustainable trials?
Yeah, there are obviously a lot of things that sites can do, right? There are a lot of opportunities out there, and as it was highlighted, I think the topic generally creates a lot of support and a lot of collaboration opportunities. That's certainly something I see across sponsors, but also with sites, with vendors, and with partners in general. That this is certainly a great opportunity. To start, I would always suggest to start small, right? Take the things ahead of you that can be turned into quick wins to demonstrate kind of this this increased business benefit that can come from sustainability. Because it is a change management effort, after all, right? Everybody needs to kind of embed it more in their decision making, and that requires some time and it requires some stakeholder management. But generally, the topic is very well perceived, and if you start with the small steps in the right direction, a lot can happen.
Great, thank you. And ladies? Final words of advice?
I would continue on what Patrick said, that it's collaboration. Don't try and do it yourself. Find partners, find technical partners, there are sponsors out there who are willing to partner. I know we have partnered with Pfizer and Amgen on standardization of barcodes under GS1 standards. We have partnered with GSK on some things. Like, there are sponsors out there that really want to, Novartis, really want to help and need the sites to help this work. But also partner with your legal departments, partner with your operation and your administrative departments, because the more we can provide data about how this drives savings and aligns with their needs, the better able we are to get the culture and the funding and the acceptance and the speed to adoption that we need to be able to make some of these changes.
Thank you. I know it's been referenced a few times. We do have a QR code for the trial carbon calculator. So we'll put that up on the board as another resource for teams to check out. But if you could please give a round of applause for our panelists. Patrick, thank you for joining us from far, far away. We appreciate you being here. And if we have any questions, again, it's an open forum where we welcome your comments or questions. Or other efforts that places have done to be more sustainable.
Hi, thank you so much. Obviously AI has a lot to offer in terms of finding ways to make research more efficient, but since it's also very energy intensive, how do we find the sweet spot to maximize efficiency while not wasting all of our everything that we're working for on the AI that we're using?
I think you have to have smart workflows first, right? Catherine talked about it this morning. And Dr. Califf, AI is not going to solve the operational challenges that we have if we're not thinking smart to begin with. And that's about using our data smarter. It's about using our process smarter. It's about using technology more smartly. But you're absolutely right to think about that. And I think that's one of the things we have to do before we even go out into the AI world.
Absolutely. AI is fantastic, but at a cost. My hometown is actually facing a data center being built, and so the public is really trying to fight it. But it's a very real fact in the use of a tool. So hopefully, with time, that AI will also be able to not impact resources so much.
I think that the word partnership has already been discussed, and I think that partnering with your vendors for ITs and servers, et cetera, look and start asking your companies, what is your supplier sustainability code of conduct? What do you have? What are your policies there? What is it that you're asking your vendors to do? Look to see who are you partnering with and what are their sustainability efforts. To your point of, yes, it's still going to be retained in a server somewhere, but this company, it operates sustainably, and what are they doing to offset that, as opposed to a company that's not doing anything? So start asking more questions, and in particular, partnering with your vendor and your vendor approach. And to us, that has been very beneficial for us as we navigate that really great question that you asked, which is the offset of AI and the increased cost, because I heard some staggering number, the difference between a simple Google search versus an AI search for a similar type of information, that the AI search was 7 times more carbon impact than a simple Google search. So again, what do you need? Do you need a hammer or a sledgehammer? Don't use the same tool for all your scratching of itches. So I think that it's incumbent on us to use our tools better, more wisely, with sustainability in mind, and then also knowing who you're partnering with and what are they doing as well.
Well said. Any other questions, comments? All right, well, we thank you all for being here. And thank you.
Everyone.
All right, thank you, Jen, Sarah, Cindy, and Patrick for that very important discussion on sustainability in clinical trials. Our next breakout session begins at 3:15 here in Ellington. We'll be covering best practices for clinical trial budgeting. So take the next, what do we have? 9 minutes to recharge, get some water, and we'll see you in the next breakout. Thank you.